whether you are here or whether you are listening later. Welcome to the lunch lectures in the series that we will be giving from March to June. This is now number 6 in the series of the lectures that are both given for PARATUS project members, students from the University of Vienna, and other interested participants. Today, the topic will be aspects related to vulnerability and capacity assessment. We will have 2 presentations today. Maybe I will start first my recording and then don't forget it. Oh, it is already recorded. Good. 2 presentations, starting first by my colleague, Mila Koeva. She is associate professor here in the University of Twente, and she has a PhD on 3D modeling in architectural photogrammetry, and she is a specialist on digital twins, and her presentation will also deal with this topic on how to represent, say, the urban environment, mostly in 3D, for different types of applications, including also disaster risk management. After that, my colleague Funda Atun, co-coordinator of the PARATUS project, will present an important component also within analysis of impact chains, is looking back to historical events using forensic analysis. That will be the second half of the presentation. So without further ado, I would like to invite Mila to start her presentation and share the screen.
Thank you very much, Kees. Thank you very much, Funda. Thank you very much all that you invited me today. It's a pleasure for me to be with you and to give this talk about the topic of digital twins. So I would like to start this lecture first by answering the question, what is digital twins? How do we understand it? Because if you look in the literature, you can see that there are numerous different definitions of this topic and this term, and it can be very much misunderstood. So on this slide, you can see that we have a group which is called Digital Twin GeoHub, and these are my colleagues here in the university, and we decided to give a definition so that everybody understands what do we mean by digital twins when we are speaking. So we define it as a digital replica of our physical environment, which supports decision making through integration of different types of data, so that we can provide different analysis with this data. It can be a 2D or a 3D representation, but important is that we also have a dynamic link between the physical city or physical environment and the virtual environment. So we try to represent not only static assets, but to represent, let's say, a dynamic world. So we can assess the past, the current, or the future state of our cities. So this is an answer of what are digital twins. But let's now a little bit think about why do we need it. So on this slide, you can see different examples. For example, big cities where there is an urbanization, and we believe that by creating a virtual replica of our physical cities, we can solve challenges like pandemics, climate change, disaster management, or just like thinking of how to improve different living conditions. You can see in the middle that we can represent slum area, which is very hard to be modeled. Also, we have to not forget the underground element that also has to be represented. So this is the question of why do we need it? But how do we do it? It's a very complex topic, and there is no straightforward answer on this question. So there are many, many methods that you can use for that. You can do also different combinations of methods. Here in the University of Twente in the geospatial faculty and Earth observation, we are trying to think about this question following the principles of combining geospatial information, sensor data that is mounted on different platforms. You can see here on the slide that to represent our real world, we start by using different sensors like satellite images or aerial images or UAV images. We can also use sensors like LiDAR technology. And then having this information, we think how to extract meaningful information which will serve our purpose of creating our digital twin. We can, of course, use some automation or cloud computing, and we can, of course, store all this in digital databases. So usually this is the workflow that we are following. Of course, you can you can use part of it, or you can do different other combinations. But as I mentioned, it's very much challenging because every application has can have a different approach. If you look at the first video in the top left side of my screen, you can see a transport case. What kind of data do we need for such type of case? How do we visualize it? What kind of information do we need to integrate? On the second screen, on the second video, you can see that we can do different analysis, like shadow analysis. We can go on different scales, like a building scale or city scale, depending on the purpose of or the application that we would like to focus. On the third example, you can see that we can also use information from citizens. So all of you as citizens can contribute to our digital twin creation. We can use artificial intelligence or store the data in a cloud and distribute it via different networks so that we reach maximum efficiency and effectiveness of our 3D city creation. So you can see here some more of the video. And the last example is how do we visualize our data to different stakeholders? So we need to adapt to whom are we presenting basically our outputs, who will be working with our data, are our stakeholders able to visualize and distribute it? So all these components, you can see that they hide different challenges. And it's quite a complex, let's say, topic. Thinking of a city digital twins, you can see on this slide how usually we are kind of thinking and what processes we are following. First, we think of data collection and data management and data processing. Then we go to another level of situational awareness. So we are thinking of what real-time data we can incorporate, how can we monitor, how can we track, how can we localize. There is some noise around. I would like to ask you to switch off your microphones, please. Thank you. So also we can think, how do we integrate this different type of data coming from different sensors so that we collaborate with different stakeholders? And then we go to the level of planning, making different solutions and going forward to predict future. And we can also visualize our final results in different ways. Okay, I mentioned that we can have a 2D or 3D virtual replica of our real world or our environment. It depends on the application, which approach we will take. Cities are complex, and sometimes 3D environment is much more easy understandable if we can visualize it in a volumetric way, in a 3D version, rather than just a planning way like in a 2D maps. So this complexity kind of requires depth, requires third dimension. Of course, if you have data and if you have the methods that you can use 3D. But in both cases, in 2D or 3D, we have many challenges that we have to think. For example, here with acquiring different data sets, we have to think how to store them, how to put them in the right coordinate system, if needed, how to transform them from one to another, what type of data we will combine, raster or vector, can we do some data conversions, do we use raster data or geometric data, which you can see on this slide. So there are a variety of geometric models that you can create from your data. All these are methods, let's say, to answer the question, how do we create our digital twins? Apart from that, we need to keep some logic, and we need to keep some link and relationships between our geometric models. And we also need to know what do our elements mean. So we need semantic modeling. So whether we are representing a school, a hospital, this is a semantic information attached to each individual building. So basically, this was kind of a foundation of why, what, and how do we do digital twins. And here I would like to share with you some challenges that we can tackle by having a virtual replica of our digital environment. For example, we can solve some challenges related to transport, some challenges related to built environment or urban mobility, some problems we can discuss related to climate resilience, climate change, or really simply communication or asset management. I would like also to drive an attention on the question how digital twins can help manage or respond natural disasters. I believe you're more experts on this than me, but if we ask this question, we can think about how we can, how a digital replica of a city can help for emergency responders to access real-time understanding of our disaster, how they can impact on the physical assets, for example. We can get some insights on the nature of the disaster, on potential effects of these disasters. And for example, we can think of strategies and plans for recovery or reconstruction after a disaster. We can monitor, if we have a real-time data, the disaster in the moment it is happening, and we can monitor the progression of this disaster. We can have some, let's say, responsive plans, how to manage it in an effective and efficient manner. We can do different simulations and predictions. This we can do, for example, in advance, so that we kind of try to assess the future impact of disasters. We can also identify potential vulnerabilities, or we can also identify points of failure where we can assess, or we can help planners to develop different strategies so that they ensure some kind of communication. And during a disaster, there is kind of on-time operational adequate reaction. Overall, digital twins, with all these, let's say, examples, you can see that we can have insights how we can help reduce the impact of a disaster. We can visualize the past, we can visualize real time, and we can try to predict what can happen so that we can have some mitigation strategies for that. Apart from all this was kind of the theoretical part of this lecture. I would like to show you some examples from our work on these topics. Some of them are related to disaster, some of them are just related to how to create digital twins and how can we apply them for other applications. So Here is one application related to assessment of potential disruption from earthquakes in Istanbul using 3D models. So you can see on the video that I will just start, that our student that was working on this topic, he assessed the vulnerability by very detailed assessment of each building, coloring it according to potential vulnerability. Also, he colored and assessed the road closure. For example, if the building collapses, how much of the roads will be blocked, what type of mitigation strategies can be performed. All this was kind of done in advance so that if there is a disaster in Istanbul, all needed parties and stakeholders have some idea where to react first, let's say, where to go and which people, where the people will be most vulnerable. You can see here building damage disaster and local road closure risk assessment. Another case that I want to show you is related to a flood disaster possibility and how, for example, such type of disaster can influence the distribution of certain disease. So if you look at my video in the lower bottom corner, you can see a very, let's say, simple visualization of flood in a slum area in Brazil, and we assessed in case of higher level of water, how many people would be exposed to this disease called leptospirosis. So it was a very detailed analysis. For all examples that I'm giving you, you can see on the slides there are links. So if you want to read more, you can always go on the slides and check yourself the publications. Here is one example that I would like to give you related to digital twins for South Africa, and the project was called Joe Trash. So here the students were trying to create a digital twin in support of effective trash collection. So you can see here the method they have been using. It's ArcGIS plus dashboard. And what did they do? Basically, they created a 3D model. They located the garbage bins in the location of the city. They have also assessed the land use and the population density in the city. And there are real-time sensors in each of the garbage bins, which is giving the level of fullness of each of these garbage bins. So you can see that they created this dashboard, which is collecting real-time information and visualizing the status of each of those garbage bins. So basically, people can go in Johannesburg, they can just scan this QR code and also give some information to the stakeholders where they have to adequately collect the garbage. For example, there might be an illegal trash place, so they can provide information so that the authorities can take action on that. You can see here how does it look when you basically scan this QR code. You can get into this visualization, and this is the way you will see how much are the full containers and in general their status. Another example, again related to South Africa, was application of digital twins, which is similar to Google Map, but instead of giving you the fastest route from point A to point B, since in South Africa there is quite a challenge related to safe walking in the streets, then you will get the safest route in Johannesburg. So I can show you what the students have developed. It's a mobile application, which also has a desktop applications, which really, like Google Map, can give you the safest route from one to another point. And since it is real-time data involved, these routes are being continuously changed. So also as a citizen, you can provide some information so that these routes are continuously being updated. If you see here on this slide, you can see that we have integrated static information and real-time information for this application. And this is an example of the same development, but in a desktop version, which is being, let's say, monitored continuously from the involved stakeholders and organizations that need to take action about it. This is also the methodology, if you want to know how it was done. And this is what do you get also during your usage of this application. So you can have time effect, you can have the crime effect, and you can see here some warnings. When you're walking, you can see a real-time warning, okay, please avoid this road, go to left, right, something like this. Yeah, how can this also help urban planners? Of course, it can help because they can also monitor how many inhabitants have been in danger on certain routes, so they can take some actions to, let's say, improve this situation. Yeah, this is the same story, but giving you warning on the desktop. Apart from that, you can see that in the application also it is incorporated some kind of 3D visualization, which is taking into account the sunlight. So if there is sun, you feel safe. So also it gives you those streets that are open, that are bright. So it gives you the safer feeling when you're walking and navigating through the city. And the second video I will show you is again related with that, but not with the sun, but when you can see more, so the openness of the streets also plays a role. Just a sec. Okay, the presentation crashed. It seems the video didn't start. I will restart it. There are too many videos in this PowerPoint.
You also have a very interesting desktop.
Sorry, very full. Yeah, sorry, I will restart it. Wait, we were up to here, yes. So this was the video which we stopped. So on the right one, you can basically also see how the students have performed visibility analysis. So one was shadow analysis due to the sun effect, and the other was a visibility analysis. And all this is integrated in the application that you can have on your mobile phone. So another application I want to show you is related with asset management. There are many countries where there is a poor condition of the roads, and there is, of course, very dense network, and due to weather conditions, the roads can be damaged. So how to tackle these problems and how to get, let's say, continuous real-time information so that we can update. So you can see here the application that students have developed. They have visualized the roads based on their status, let's say, in terms of asset. And you can see the dynamics. So also here, I think, let me just start this video. Opa. Okay, wait. Now you can see it in a dynamic way. So basically the data collection is done via cameras which are mounted on the service trucks. And there is a continuous semi-automation recognition, which is visualizing with yellow, green, and red dots the status of the different conjunctions in the roads. And here on this visualization, you can see it also in this 2D kind of visualization, which is again in real time giving you the red, green, and yellow. And how can citizens be involved in that? You can also have a mobile application which you can signalize of, let's say, different damages on the road. Another very interesting application I would like to share also with you, which is related to our city where we are located, Enschede. And here, students have also been thinking, how can we tackle urban heat island effect and problems in cities? So this is the methodology, and we have incorporated 2D and 3D methods with GIS and open source and closed source type of solutions. First, I want to show you our city in 3D, and they have visualized it with Esri software. All the data here is on its correct location, all the buildings, vegetation, road, and so on. And apart from that, they, I think in few minutes, you can see that they have integrated it with an urban heat island map, so that you can see which part of the city has, let's say, potential to be overheated. You can also play here, you can see with the daylight, of course, and so on. This application, and again to do shadow analysis or visibility analysis. But the more important for me was to show you that you can have this heat map overlaid on our city, and you can visually see where are the critical areas. So this is using GIS type of platform. How can we use that in a virtual reality, let's say, environment? So this is Unity platform. I will show you this video where if you look and you walk inside of a city in 3D, you can already get your orientation where it is warmer and where it is colder on your way. So there is a combination of top view and one-person navigation view. Yeah. Now I want to go to another example where we can we have explored how we can use digital twins in the city of Sofia. It's in Bulgaria, for providing different scenarios related to walkability. So we use generative design as method, and we produce many possible solutions for the urban planners based on different indicators. And in this particular study, we wanted to combine, let's say, indicators related to access to different amenities, but at the same time, greeneries. So you as citizens, apart from being accessing different amenities, how much will you be stimulated to walk rather than use your car if there is a nice green environment around you? That was this study. And based on all these indicators, they have automatically, we have created many solutions so that the most optimal are selected and proposed to the urban planners for future development. Another example here was related with, again, visualizing a slum area, which is very complicated to be created in a 3D model in Brazil, where we were using drone data or UAV data to create automatically our cities and to create a real-time connection between the municipality and physical city in 3D form. And this is my last example for today, where I want to just show you how challenging it is to visualize different type of data sets so that we create our digital twins, and moreover to show them in a web environment. So this is again our city of Enschede. And you will see that we used different open source data to visualize our city in different levels of details. And you can see here that we are coloring our buildings depending on their purposes. And apart from that, for this application, we have integrated different type of data. You can see UAV data, terrestrial laser scanning data, but also mobile application, which means people data. And we try to also visualize it in a virtual reality. So this dot, yellow dot on the video is our new building where we are currently located. And basically we wanted to did my presentation again? Yes, again crashed. It's too heavy. So until it is restarting, I will just tell you. We wanted to have data with different sensors which have acquired the building during its construction. Okay, just a second to open it again. Here it is. So what did we do? We have acquired with drones, as I mentioned, but also with terrestrial laser scanning and mobile laser scanning. And you can see that we can visualize all the stages of the construction of our building with so-called point cloud data. So you can see ground floor, then I will now switch to first, second floor. You can see it doesn't look very beautiful, but it's because it's all in the phase of construction. And the challenging part of this let's say, work was to integrate different type of data. So you can see this is BIM model, building information model, which is combined with the point cloud data, and you can access the building from outside, from inside, and get some 3D realistic, let's say, overview of what the building will be. So that was my last example. I hope it was interesting for you. And I hope I gave you some insights. How can you use digital twins for your applications? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mila. There was some hiccups, but they were really very interesting, and it worked out very good. I understand that for the questions, let's that we do it after you come back, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
all the audience, please keep your questions still in your mind, and Mila will go to a meeting, and then after the presentation by Funda, she will be back online, so you can ask her the questions. Thank you very much, Mila, and go have a good meeting.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So we move now to Funda on forensic analysis.
Yes. Is it? No. Let me just share the presentation. Yes. Do you see it? Do you see it now?
Yes, I see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was looking for a detective photo and then I found my photo.
Question
Okay,
is,
so
who is the other person?
it was it was one of the interviews in UT for the strategic planning 2030, and then they took this photo, and I said, yeah, why would I use another detective photos that I have one? Okay, so welcome everyone. Today we will talk about disaster forensic. So it is basically like to understand when an incident occurs, it is to understand like who, what, where, when, and how it occurred. So I'm not sure whether I need to introduce myself, but like most of you know me, I am Funda Atun. I'm an urban planner and I'm an assistant professor of strategic spatial planning in University of Twente, faculty of ITC. So I'm trying to, yeah. And today in this lecture, we will talk about first the definition of forensic, and then I will explain you the concept of reverse engineering. And then I will give you 3 examples. There are more, but we will focus on the 3 main examples, the one developed by IRDR and the PARC method, and the detecting disaster root causes developed by the DKKV. And at the end, I will also explain you how we plan to use forensic analysis in PARATUS project to investigate the learning case studies. Okay, so forensic means relating to or denoting the application of scientific methods and techniques to the investigation of crime. And it's like first they started using it in medicine for criminal investigation to understand whether the person is poisoned, and also to understand the composition of bodies. When we look at literature, the first forensic reports go back to 44 BC, like after the stabbing of the Julius Caesar. And it is actually an analysis, and it's that is related to law, court, and public debate. So forensic actually comes from the Latin word forum, which means a place that we have the public debate. And why we call it reverse engineering? Because you need to start from the end result to go back and to understand what happened actually. And you need to gather evidence from multiple sources to understand how this failure occurred. So we can look at the newsletters, photos, films, videos, and also like interviews and reports. And you need to collect data from these various sources, but also it depends on how you interpret this data. So your technical knowledge is very, very important while conducting a forensic method. And data will always be incomplete, and you should like fill the gap with your knowledge and the technology. So I have this quotation, and so the mind of the operator should be at the tip of the knife. So we really need to be able to use the knowledge and the tools, the technology that we are using to understand the situation, and think our mind should be really at the tip of our tools that we are using. So this means that we also need to understand how the tools are used, and to interpret the data that we are collected. And as I mentioned, that the data will always be incomplete. So therefore, we really need to have some actions to cross-check the conclusion that we achieved after interpreting the data that we collected. So cross-check includes the answers to these questions and to the steps. Like, first of all, what was there before the event? What was the situation? What was the condition of it prior to the event? And what is present after the event? What is the condition of it? And then we need to hypothesize the pre-event condition, looking at the post-event condition. So if we know what was the condition before the event, and what is the condition after the event, so we can hypothesize also the pre-event condition if we don't have sufficient data and knowledge. And we need to search for various evidence, and but this evidence also should deny and also support the hypothesis. And of course, the use of technical knowledge and skills. And at the end, we need to relate the facts and the evidence that we collected into a scenario that explains the occurrence of the event. So there is this forensic investigation of disasters method developed by IRDR community. This is one of the main ones, and it is used widely, it is to recognize the influence of human activity on disasters. So, in forensic analysis, the main focus is we have different elements, but all these elements affect each other, but also the social structures affect the physical structure. So we really need to recognize and understand the influence of human activity on disasters. And the purpose is to identify the root causes and to evaluate them, and also to broaden the scope of this disaster risk reduction. So if we know the root causes, then we can implement some measures to reduce the disaster risk in the long term. And of course, this can be done by linking these measures to planning and policy. So some measures will be related to planning, some of them will be related to policy. Another purpose is to support economic and social growth while reducing the disaster risk. So if we understand the root causes, so it will be possible for us to, on one hand, to reduce the disaster risk, on the other hand, to support the growth, the development of the area. And of course, this is structured around the causal chain, and it is a descriptive analysis of risk drivers, dynamic processes, and root causes. In foreign methodology, we need 3 different types of data. We need data to understand the hazards, like the scale, intensity, return period, etc. And also we need data to understand exposure, like social and environmental elements, how the people are distributed, the infrastructure, land use zoning, and and also data on institutional elements and governance, like legislation, building codes, the insurance system, and zoning norms and legal provisions. So I'll move to the second method. It is developed by a private organization, Zurich Insurance Group. And it is called Post-Event Review Capability, the PERC method. And here, the focus is to understand what happened and how it is structured around the risk management cycle. So they are looking at 3 different phases in the risk management cycle: the preparedness, response, and recovery. And in this method, there are 3 major components: agents, systems, and institutions. And they are looking at the interactions between these components. And the final outcome is a very structured report. And the difference of PERC method is they don't focus only what went wrong, but also they focus on what went well. And they provide at the end of the report some actionable recommendations. So with the PERC method, they look at the institutional landscape map. I'll show you one example in the following slides. They identify all the actors that are involved. They look at the key decisions. They look at the communication channels, and also they would like to analyze the faults in the system, bottlenecks in the system. And they have some set of measurable components focusing on like physical elements, financial elements, human like education skills, health of people in the system, social and natural elements. So as I showed you, there are three main components like systems, institutions, and agents. And for example, while they are analyzing agents, they are looking the responsiveness capacity and reorganization capacity of these agents. They are looking at the relationships between agents, such as whether there is trust or not, and how these agents develop a network. Are there some networks of agents? And what are the ways for them to access to resources and capital, etc. And they're also looking at the resourcefulness and the capacity to identify and anticipate problems, and the capacity to visualize a plan, and how the collaboration works between these agents. They are also looking at the capacity to learn, and by analyzing the various skills, techniques, and the behaviors to learn of new information. And the other component is the system, the infrastructure and ecosystem in the area. So they are analyzing the flexibility, diversity, redundancy, and modularity of these systems. And they are looking whether the system is safe for failure. So they are looking whether the system is designed to fail and what is the ability to absorb or respond to the sudden shocks. And the third element is the institution. So when they are investigating the institutions, they are looking at the rights and entitlements to use the key resources and the ways to access to capitals. And how does the decision-making work, whether it is transparent, accountable, responsive, and they are also investigating the ways to access accurate information and to be able to judge the risk and the vulnerability. So this is an example how they mapped the institutional landscape. This is for Nepal. And for example, they are mapping them, but they're also showing like how the relationship works among these different institutions that are like responsible for like disaster risk management. And they also included some like NGOs and political, like for example, here there's Red Cross community and other political organizations. And I just include these questions as examples. So like I showed you three different components, and I also showed you like what are the characteristics or indicators that they use to investigate these components. And for each component later on in this report, there are various questions, and these are some examples. Like for example, they also divided these questions according to different phases, and here like immediately the first questions are to understand the situation immediately after the disaster. Like it asks whether the evacuation worked, and the early warning, like about protection of important assets, and what was the impact, what was the indirect impact of disaster. And then we have the response and recovery phases with different questions. Like if you want to use this method, like there is a huge report, it is the like here the reference and also at the end, and all these questions, like you can have a look at them and to understand how they assess the capability of these three different elements. Okay. This is the third one. It is like detecting disaster root causes by this German organization, DKKV. And for example, they say like root causes are interrelated set of widespread and general processes within a society. So they are mainly looking at the like they are mainly searching the root causes within the society. And they have like they divided them into different aspects. For example, spatially distant. So like arising in a distant center of economic and political power, temporally distant, like the things that happened in the past. And we also say that when we define the vulnerability, we say that it is accumulated of mistakes done in the past, or the impact of the accumulated mistakes done in the past on the current environment. So, and also they are looking the cultural assumptions like ideologies, beliefs, social relations in the area. And so they are actually, most of them are invisible, and like the root causes are invisible. And with this method, they are trying to make them visible. And so root causes might involve processes, structures that go beyond an individual crisis or event. So like now I will show you some examples, and like some root causes, like they go back to like 20 centuries back before the event, and then you have the impact of it during the event. And there are also the drivers, which are the processes and activities, and that translate the effects of root causes, like temporarily or spatially, into vulnerable conditions and consequently into risks. And this is the structure they used. First, they like scale and scope, like they decide on the scope of the analysis and gather information on the nature of the risk. And then they start the root cause analysis and to develop a framework and to identify the disaster impact and also develop hypotheses and to analyze context-specific conditions and to be able to determine underlying drivers. And then policy options and recommendations. And here, like what kind of data they use, like they are looking at like to be able to analyze the root causes, they are looking at early warning reports, disaster reports, real-time evaluation, PDNIs, and lessons learned reports, and also the assessment in the field, vulnerability and risk assessment, and institutional analysis. So these are the methods they use in the detecting disaster root causes methodology. Oops, sorry, I need to go back. Oh, can I go back? Sorry, I need to go back.
You are. Is it also stuck?
I lost the control of the computer. You don't see my screen, right?
No, no.
I cannot. Okay, just a moment. Sorry. I'm trying to. Yes, I will share my screen again. Apologies. Okay, so I was here.
Yeah.
Do you see it in the presentation mode?
Yes.
Okay. So this is then like they are having these different levels, and so like they set some root causes and the level of analysis, and then in the middle, looking at these different reports, like collecting the data, they investigate the drivers. And as you see, like level of analysis includes vulnerability, like on one hand, the susceptibility, but on the other hand, they are also looking at the coping and adaptive capacity mechanisms, whether they are available or not. They are looking at the exposure. They are looking at the description of the event. extreme event, and also the 3 cycles in disaster risk management: response, recovery, and disaster risk reduction. And then root causes are grouped under 5 categories: development, governance, awareness and perception, political environment, and physical and environmental conditions. So this is like the rough graph. And then by conducting analysis and collecting the data, they fill the boxes in the middle and connect the root causes with the level of analysis, and they define the drivers. Okay, this is an example from Haiti. So as you see, like for the ones like who don't remember, like there was a huge earthquake in Haiti in January 2010, and with a 7.3 Richter scale, and it resulted in 3,100 deaths and 3 million people affected. So because after the earthquake, also like due to like geographical conditions of the island, like they had several hurricanes, and as a result of it, some cholera events. So all these events also worsened the current situation. And so of course, like the main driver that they found out is the political environment in the area, and the instability of the political environment, and also unstable security situation, and like having centralized government structures like didn't provide the necessary flexibility to act quickly during the event. And like the main problem was also for awareness and perception. It was the failed perception of the national government, and so there was like the legal framework was missing, and so as you see also like the vulnerability was very high due to food insecurity, poverty, and in the area. And so when we look at these different levels of disaster risk management, like response, recovery, and disaster risk reduction, they also defined various drivers linked to them. For example, for response, insufficient search and rescue, but also like the management of the international relief organizations also failed in the area. And for recovery, like it was inappropriate, and then due to actually this can be linked also to physical and environmental conditions like the cholera outbreak. So it is like the result of other extreme events like hurricanes that occurred like due to the the location of the island. And like disaster preparedness didn't exist there before. The main focus was on the disaster disaster management, like the response after the occurrence of a disaster. And so if we continue, the other example is from Indonesia. So it is in Indonesia in 2004, there was an earthquake. And the earthquake also triggered a tsunami that affected 5 million people. And the main root cause was the political environment in the area. So it was a post-civil conflict, there was huge impacts of the post-civil conflict because there was an ongoing conflict between military and this FAM movement, and the basic infrastructure, it was destroyed. Like there was no communication, no sanitation system, no health systems, and the key infrastructures, they are destroyed and they were insufficient. The poverty reduced the vulnerability of the people living in the area, and of course the preparedness, there was lack of disaster preparedness before the occurrence of this event. And so the next one is the Mozambique. So here, they decided to link all the drivers with the development, because according to the analysis, the main problem was lack of resources and capacities and the inadequate equipment, and this resulted in also not poor urban planning, and not knowing the situation, not being able to develop a forecasting system. So that's why not having a good infrastructure because of the lack of resources, capacities, not having equipment. So they decided to link all these drivers and with the root cause, that is development. And okay, I will continue with PARATUS. So how we plan to use forensic analysis in PARATUS. In PARATUS project, we have two types of learning case studies. We have two types of case studies. One is learning case studies, where we focus on the previous disasters to understand also the root causes, and also to see the impact chains occurred in these events. And the other one is application case studies, where we implement the tools that we develop. And we selected a set of historical disaster events, like learning case studies, based on three main criteria. So we wanted to have represent hazard interactions in the European context, and we wanted to have analyze the impact in different combination of sectors. But also, we have some global cases. Although they happened outside Europe, they had an impact in Europe. Or they might also in the future, they might illustrate the situations that might happen in Europe. So these are just examples. They are not all the historical events that we want to analyze. In total, we will have 18. But here I just included some of them to show you the variety of it. We will look at the floods, heat waves, storms, COVID pandemic, landslides, and space weather event, and how, for example, this geo-effective space weather had an impact on the Caribbean radio communication during hurricane response. And we will also look at the earthquakes that occur in Turkey in various times. And also we will also investigate the recent one that occurred 2023. And also another earthquake in Romania. So I'm not sure whether you are aware, but we have some capitals in Europe that are waiting for their major earthquake. One of them is Bucharest in Romania. And we also have Athens, that's time to time always prone to earthquakes, and time to time we had events also in Athens in Greece. So therefore also what we learn looking at the historical events will help us also to understand what can be done in the future to reduce the current risk. And we define a protocol to follow the forensic analysis in PARATUS. But this is the current situation, but I am sure we will develop it a little bit further, and by combining it also with impact chain method. And according to this protocol, it is important first to describe the hazard, as I showed you the data in the very beginning, the intensity of the hazard, or if it is an earthquake magnitude. So we need to describe the hazard first, and then we need to describe loss and damage due to this hazard, and also direct and indirect impacts. And we will consider whether the impacts are differentially distributed between different areas, social groups, type of infrastructure and sectors. So we won't only list the impacts, direct and indirect impacts, but we will also look how they are distributed between different areas and sectors. And also, like we need to investigate the differences between less exposed and hazard-prone social and economic elements, or more exposed and hazard-prone elements. So which ones suffered more by the impact? It is also important to look at the principal pre-disaster conditions because, for example, in the previous examples, I mentioned the impact of the civil war that occurred like years, 20, 30 years, and how it had an impact on the socio-economic conditions, and how the socio-economic conditions have an impact on the physical structure, and therefore how what the situation is look like after the occurrence of the event. So all these things are linked. So therefore, it is also important looking at the pre-disaster conditions. And other aspect is looking at the post-impact relief and rehabilitation processes and how they are carried out, whether they were carried out or not. And this can be done by describing all the activities and checking what went well, what went wrong within these activities. And this can be done with the help of literature, but also by conducting some interviews with some key stakeholders. And it is also important to understand the existing political agenda in the area and how it affects response and rehabilitation processes. And on the other hand, we need to look at the relation between material components, buildings and infrastructure, how these affect each other. If you remember in Mila's presentation, there was a project on how vulnerable built stock might affect the road blockage, because looking at the amount of debris that can be caused by the collapse of buildings and also the width of the road, help us to understand whether the road will be blocked or not. So looking at the relation between buildings and transportation infrastructure will help us also to understand or to better organize the response activities or to decide the route of the emergency road network. And it is also important to look at the relation between social priorities and choices and how this relation have an impact on the disaster. And the time between the occurrence of the event and and the initial response activities, and when the response activities were at full scale. So this is important also to understand. And we need to look at available resource pathways to the affected community and whether it had to facilitate an adequate response to the events and processes of hazard impact. And then another aspect is to see whether there were some identifiable response recovery processes. And also the role of the insurance in increasing or decreasing the local resilience. So these are the aspects that we will look in the learning case studies. And additionally, we ask our partners while preparing this learning case study reports to mention the differences in the ability of different social and economic groups to cope with and recover from disaster and its secondary impacts. For example, Istanbul megacity is one of our case study areas. And you can imagine that in a megacity, of course, there are different social and economic groups. and what are the differences between these groups to cope with and recover from a disaster. So it is important to understand. And to elaborate such differences, we also want to discuss the main elements and that explain the social and spatial differentiation in such processes. And like to understand also the coping mechanisms and resilience, we need to investigate and understand the role of social organization, the social ties, social networks, and how they contribute to build resilience. And so this can be different in every culture. So it's also very much linked to the current situation in the area and political environment. And it is important to mention the specific social organizations and practices that were activated by the hazard. So we see a lot of examples to such practices after the occurrence of a disaster, and what was the impact of it, and how it helped to enable the community to self-organize and to respond to the disaster. And to explain the institutions, the actions related to like the questions to understand root and underlying causes of the disaster. And also like if there are some specific dimensions of resilience for a given population in the area, we also ask like our partners to explain them. And lastly, it is important to mention the impact of social conflicts and tension and between development priorities, disaster risk, employment, and economic sectors. We see a lot of examples in cities, especially in the like developing cities. Like, and it is important to understand what are the tensions, what are the conflicts between these development priorities and disaster risk reduction measures, and also like in some specific economic sectors such as agriculture, tourism, and how they have an impact on resilience. So these are the aspects that we would like to include in our reports while investigating the historical disasters. And these are the references that I used in the presentation. So thank you very much.